Good morning. All right. Well, it's great to be back in Jacksonville. It's great to be back on the west side of town, and we want to thank everybody for being here. We got a discussion that needs to happen in this state about providing property tax relief for Floridians. We've got, if you think about how we're governed, we're ranked number one economy in the country 2 years in a row by both CNBC and U.S. News and World Report. We're ranked number one in higher education. We've been ranked either number one or number two in education for the last several years. Number one in education freedom, number one in parent involvement in education. Crime rate is at a 50-year low. If you look at yet we're doing a lot of big things to help. I'll talk in a minute. But if you look at Florida's budget, we have millions of more people than New York does, and yet our budget is less than half the size of New York State. If you look at all the debt that the state of Florida accumulated over 180 years of its existence, just since I've been governor, we've retired 41% of that, and we have the lowest per capita debt in the entire United States amongst all 50 states. As a Floridian, your share of our state debt is about $400. As an American, your share of the national debt is $105,000 per citizen, and unfortunately, that is going up. So we're doing right. And if you look at the size of state government, we have the lowest number of state employees per capita in the entire United States of America, and yet within that framework, I mean, do you think that New York has better roads, schools, or services than we do? Of course not. If you look at what we've done just since I've been governor, we've done record-breaking support for transportation and infrastructure and roads and ports and all the things that are really important, particularly for a growing state. In fact, we've put billions and billions of dollars additional to front load a lot of projects that weren't even scheduled to be completed or even started till next decade. Some of these things are going to be completed 15 years ahead of schedule. If you look at what we've done for conservation, we established a Florida wildlife corridor. We've done Everglades restoration. We've done things for springs that no one thought was possible 5 or 6 years ago. And then if you look at education, we have universal school choice. We've done billions of dollars in increases for teacher salaries. We have the highest per pupil spending that we've ever had. Now that in and of itself, because you go look around the country, some of the places that have the worst results have massive high per pupil. It's a question of, is that going to bureaucracy and red tape, or is it actually making a difference with personnel and in the classroom? And we've really worked hard for the latter. So even as we're paying off debt, cutting billions of dollars in taxes, which we've done over the last 6 years, running big surpluses. We've quadrupled the state's rainy day fund just since I've been governor. We're close to quadrupling it. That's not happening in many of these other states. So we're doing a lot of big things that I think people want to see the state do, while at the same time really maintaining something that is working very well. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud that we don't have an income tax. And as long as I have anything to say about it, that will never happen in Florida. I'm also proud we've been able to cut a lot of taxes. But the number one thing in terms of tax is that people talk about is what's happened with property taxes. If you go back 5 or 6 years ago, Florida was fine. But when COVID hit, we were open. Some of these states were closed. People flooded down here. And you had massive spike in real estate values, and which, on the one hand, like you have your home, that's your number one asset for many people, and if you bought it for $250,000 10 years ago, then all of a sudden over a 5-year period it triples in value. That for you is an asset if you eventually sell it, that you would realize, but with the increase in values as people are buying homes in particular, you have higher tax basis to pay property taxes. And sometimes, you have a homestead is great, but the homestead is limited in terms of how much benefits you get. And so your property goes up 3 times. You're paying more, no question about it. Then if you have to buy a new home because maybe your family's growing, maybe your job took you to a different city, you're locked in at a much higher tax basis right there, and that's really tough. And so it's like, you know, you have people, the median home price is $400-some thousand, but the median income is like $75,000, $85,000 for a family. And so how does it work where you're having to pay 10 grand a year just in property taxes? And the thing about it is, this is supposed to be your private property, but yet you could own your home for 50 years and you still got to pay the government just to live on your property. I mean, at some point, when do you own your property free and clear, or are you just always going to be paying rent to the government? So I think there's a philosophical debate that we need to have about property tax, but there's also just the practical debate, and this is not limited to Florida. If you look around the country, probably most of the people in this room, when you bought your first home, and if you did a residential mortgage, you'd look, and most of the money you would pay monthly would go to the principal and interest on the mortgage. Then you'd have some for insurance and some for taxes, but the principal and interest was always the biggest. Now, it's pretty standard across the country that the insurance plus principal and interest is more than what the taxes plus principal and interest are more than what you pay on the balance of your home. You're paying tax, you're paying insurance, and then principal and interest is less than those two combined. And so this is difficult for people. So the tax, you know, we can't control the value of homes in the government. You wouldn't want us to try to do that. It wouldn't work. Insurance, we've done a lot of reforms. The market is stabilized. More companies are coming in. But that's very, very tricky when you've got 6 major hurricanes in 7 years. Our market is the most challenging in the country. Government can't just set a rate. If I could just say you pay $1 a month, I would do that, right? But we know that everything would collapse. It's just not, it's a private market. But the tax is purely about government, right? Government can tax or not tax. We in Florida have the opportunity, even though this is a local issue mostly, to, you know, do constitutional protections. There are things we can do in Tallahassee working with the legislature, but I think it's just, you know, you get locked in, you should not be in a situation where you'd ever have to give up your home because you can't afford the taxes. So I'm glad that we're here. We've got some great folks. We've got Senator Blaise Ingoglia, who represents a district north of Tampa Bay. Jordan Hooten is a realtor here in Jacksonville. Janelle Flynn is a local resident who's going to talk about this. But I just think that when you're looking at what can you do to, one, further the free state of Florida, two, what makes the most difference for Florida residents? When I became governor, it was typical that we'd get between 80 and 90 million visitors a year. That changed a lot over the last 6 years. Last year, we had 142 million visitors to this state. And you see it on the roads. You see it. I mean, there's some burdens that come with that. But, you know, we're fortunate that they pay tax for us. You know, they pay these sales taxes. They pay hotel taxes. They do all that. Florida First means I want that 142 million and the snowbirds who live here part-time but aren't residents, the Canadians and all that. I want them to shoulder as much of the burden as possible. I want to relieve burden on Florida residents. We are unique in this country in being able to do that even more so than we've done historically, and that would be a really, really good thing for so many families across the state of Florida. So this is something that when I said a couple months ago, we want to do, obviously there's some things we can do at the state level, but structurally, if you look at Florida's constitution, this is a local, so your millage rate is not set by the state. What they do with the revenues coming in is done usually with city and county. But we have the ability, working with the legislature, to put initiatives on the ballot that will be able to allow you to vote for relief and for protection in this area. And I think it could be really, really exciting. But we need to have this debate. All your representatives need to know that this is something that you want to see, that it would make the state better. I think the economy would boom tremendously if we were able to do this, and it would really help people cope with we've seen a big increase in cost of living with all the inflation that's happened in the economy over the last 3-4 years. We don't know what's going to happen with that. You look at, home values can kind of fluctuate. We've seen booms in markets, but then there's a correction, but who knows, right? You just don't know with all this stuff. And home ownership, I don't believe in like some of the programs the federal government did to like try to manufacture loans for people that couldn't afford to pay the loans. I think that led to some problems in the first decade of this century with the financial crisis and some of these mortgage-backed securities that were really built off a lot of bogus loans that should have never been issued. But at the same time, owning a home is a key portion of the American dream. We can't try to subsidize a loan or try to act like, we can get you a mortgage when you can't afford it. But what we can do is say, when you're doing that, when you're working hard, we want to relieve burdens on you. We don't want you to be burdened down with having to pay all this tax, especially when we can collect that tax for people that don't even live here. And that, to me, would be a much better way to go about it. So I'm excited about the prospects of bringing some significant relief. It's all about Florida focused, focus on our residents, put our residents first. And while we appreciate people that come and visit here, I don't want to be cutting their taxes. I want to be cutting your taxes.